الحمد لله نستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to our webinar, Al-Balagh Academy webinar on is machine slaughtering halal or haram and all associated issues that relate to this particular topic. Now, recognizing this is a very hot topic and it arouses many sensibilities and sensitivities, many different types of people, many stakeholders, many consumers and so forth. So what we're going to do, inshallah, today is we're going to, first and foremost, talk a bit about some of the important topics related to this this heading, this title, and relate it to current practices, and also what are the Sharia accounts and perspectives to the whole idea of how we slaughter animals for consumption. So first of all, I'm going to just briefly introduce our panelists. So we've got some very important panelists who play a very important role in this particular field. So let me first start off by introducing Sheikh Yunus Dudwala, who's somebody who's not only an individual who's actually done delivers many of our courses, but also has been on our panelist discussions in a few of our webinars. So Sheikh Yunus doesn't necessarily need a deep introduction, but inshallah I'll give him a very brief introduction in relation to this. So Sheikh Yunus is the chair of the Halal Monitoring Committee. So this is quite a recognized committee, a regulatory body that is found in the UK that many of you may be familiar with, and are also recognized abroad for an immense amount of work that they do, and also in terms of how they've grown immensely over, in essence, quite a short period of time. So I'm sure Sheikh Yunus is going to give us a bit more detail about the organization and its historic sort of development for the value and for the benefit of all of us. Next, we have Sheikh or Mufti Abdullah Nana, basically somebody who's based in Novato in California, America. And he's somebody who also sits on the Islamic Fiqh Association in America, and he's done quite a lot of research, and he's looked at this from the perspective of his environment and his particular setup in America. So it'd be interesting to hear his views in relation to this as well. And finally, we have quite an important figure. We have Dr. Awal Husseini, who holds a PhD in animal science from Bristol University in the UK. So it's important for us to understand the science behind this before we start making certain statements about, whether it's harming animals, not harming animals, and all the different sort of views that people have and perceptions that people have, and really understanding the deep-ended root of this. So not only has Dr. Husseini, done quite a bit of work around the science behind it, but he's also done quite an extensive amount of work in terms of halal slaughtering and the details that really sit under that for us to benefit from, inshallah, today. So jazakumullah khair to all our panelists. I think we need to get Mufti Abdullah to come online as well, inshallah, with his camera. Maybe there's some technical issues on his side, but anyway, let's get to the nitty-gritty, inshallah. So first of all, we recognize that Islam and the Sharia has clearly stipulated some very important understandings for us in terms of what we eat and what we don't eat. So حُرِمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُّ وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are certain things that have been made haram for you to consume. So there is mention of carrion, dead meat, blood, and also swine. But that last component here that is mentioned, وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ, that which has not had Allah's name invoked upon it, i.e. is not permissible for you to consume. So that is quite an interesting point, because that really indicates that it's not just about the physical nature of what we consume that is important, because we understand the physical nature from what the science tells us, but also there's a spiritual nature to this, because when we invoke by Allah's name on slaughtering animals, then that's not a physical, visible process, but rather it's more a spiritual process that we're undergoing. And that is an important part of what we consider as halal and tayyiban, something which is halal and something which is tayyib for us to consume. Now, we have many understandings from ulama who have given us historically importance about what we consume being an essential part of our faith, because what you, like they say, you are what you consume. So in other words, if you eat haram, then clearly that will have a negative impact on us spiritually. So we're not even talking about the physical nature of what we consume, but actually the spiritual nature and how that may impact your a'mal, your actions, your thoughts, your deeds, and all the sort of spiritual inclinations that we have that connect us with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we'll talk a bit about that in more detail as we go along. But what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to bring in our panelists, inshallah. And what we'll do is we'll just talk about some of these points. So first of all, for the next 50 minutes, I'm just going to put some quite important questions to our panelists. And then in the remaining time, what I request your viewers to do is if you want to put your questions forward, please use the Q&A. And if you want to come online and speak and talk to our panelists directly, alhamdulillah, that's not a problem. But what I would like you to do is if you can message the Balagh administration team or the communication team, and just let them know which country you're from, and also what your question is briefly, so that they can filter those questions and put them forward to me, inshallah. Please make your questions relevant and to the point. So let us begin with this, the main question regarding this. So Dr. Awal Fusini, if we can begin with yourself, inshallah. Now, what exactly is the issue with halal slaughtering that is causing differences amongst Muslim scholars? I know you've been engaging with Muslim scholars from a number of different backgrounds. That's why I think it's quite useful to hear from your particular perspective initially. So somebody who's engaged with Muslim scholars, and they've all had their own approach to animal slaughter, why do they differ? Why do we have certain halal monitoring committees and regulatory bodies that have one set of conditions, and then another that has another set of conditions? Surely, you'd expect them all to be, consistent, and there should be a unanimous agreement. Can you explain why that differences exist?
Yeah, well, assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning to people from different countries, and good evening to others from wherever you're joining us from. So that is a very important question, Dr. Fakat. I have been working very closely with scholars, with certifiers in the UK for a long time. And the issues that mainly divide scholarly opinion is with regard to stunning, as to whether stunning is compatible with Islamic principles or not. The other issue is the one we're discussing today, the issue of mechanical slaughter. But what I've come to realize is that some of the scholars, excuse me to say, and even the certifiers, do not really understand some of the processes. And sometimes I try to create a better understanding on some of these processes. So if you take stunning, for instance, if you use a blanket acceptance of stunning, that is a very dangerous way to go. Because to consider stunning, you need to look at the species of animal you're slaughtering, and also the method of stunning you are looking at. So I'll give you an example. In the UK domestic regulation, which is welfare of animals, time of killing, it requires that if you are stunning a bird with gas stunning, the bird must, not should, must die in the gas chamber before it exists. Now, I had a chat with a certifier some years ago who was adamant that he was accepting gas stunning, and gas stunning was halal. So I asked him why he thought it was halal. So he said somebody in Canada told him that he saw birds being gas stunned. He took the cardiac activity of the birds, that means the heart activity of the birds, and he found that there was a heartbeat present. So that was the reason why he accepted it. But that is a very big mistake to make, in a sense that the presence of a heartbeat may not necessarily mean that the animal is alive. And also, the UK legislation clearly states that the animal must be alive, must be dead in the gas chamber. I'll give you another example before I pass it to the next speaker. I conducted...
Because that's a quite important point.
Yeah.
Now, we recognize that, I mean, this is another discussion in terms of the ethics of medicine, but we're not going to go into the details of that. But generally speaking, you'd assume that if there's a heartbeat, that there's clearly a mechanism that's still working and this animal would still be alive. What's the issue here? That would be the obvious thing, wouldn't it? People would understand it from this perspective. So I'm going to give us a bit of detail to demonstrate that this animal is not actually alive. Is that what you're going to do now?
Yeah, well, let's look at the medical definition of death.
Okay.
If you look at the definition of death 1400 years ago, at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, death was defined at the time as the ability or the inability of the body to move. So before they could before they could diagnose death, they would have said no movement at all. The animal or the human being should have no ability to move. So that is what we call cardiorespiratory death. Now, due to development in neuroscience, our understanding of the way the body works has improved from 1400 years ago. So death is now defined based on the function of the brain, and that is neurocentric death. So now it's up to the scholars. I'm not here to declare something halal or haram.
Yeah.
It's up to the scholars to decide whether you are going for cardiorespiratory death, which was done million years ago, or neurocentric death. If the scholars decide to stick to neurocentric death, which is the current definition of death, then most of the stunning methods will be outlawed, will not be fit for halal slaughter. However, if you want to stick to the prehistoric cardiorespiratory death, that means you are looking for even a heartbeat to say, even if there's a heartbeat, you say, yes, the animal is still alive. However, the current definition, the modern definition, which is based on the function of the brain, will not recognize just a heartbeat as the animal being alive. So it's up to you, the scholars, to decide.
So this is quite a technical issue in terms of defining death, but more so in particular in relation to animals. So, and you were saying further on to that?
Yeah, I wanted to give another example. I conducted a survey of scholars in 2017, where I interviewed Islamic scholars across the UK. What I wanted to understand is, I wanted to understand their perception and understanding on stunning. So the first question I asked the scholars was, if an animal, do you believe stunning induces pain? Because that is a very important question. Do you believe when you stun an animal, the animal doesn't feel pain? The majority of the scholars said, no, they do not believe that. So that is a big issue, because if you do not believe stunning reduces pain, then there is no chance that you will accept stunning. Then I change the question a little bit. So you don't believe that stunning induces...
This is for the benefit of the audience, Dr. Fusini. So the issue here is, because some people may not understand the purpose of what stunning is, what is the purpose of stunning. So stunning is there with this understanding that it will reduce the pain. Is that right? Yeah, is that the purpose of stunning? Otherwise, stunning has no purpose whatsoever other than that. Yeah. Would that be right?
Well, the
anxieties that an animal suffers and the pain that they may suffer, that is the purpose of stunning. And that's the reason why it's been legislated.
So I wanted to understand what scholars actually thought about stunning.
Okay.
But as I said, the majority of them said, no, they do not believe that stunning induces pain. So I changed the question slightly and then asked them, so what is your opinion about stunning? Do you think stunning itself is halal? So based on what they said initially, the majority of them said, no, they do not believe stunning is halal. Now, I changed the question again. If an animal is stunned and the stunning doesn't induce death, doesn't cause the death of the animal, would you accept the meat as halal? Now, I hope you're following me.
Yes, yes.
95% of the scholars said yes, they will accept the meat as halal.
Just repeat that percentage again.
95, just over 95% said they would accept.
95%. That's virtually all of them. Virtually.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
They said if the animal, if anybody can prove to them beyond reasonable doubt that the animal is alive after stunning, they would accept the meat as halal. And that would be my question to the panel. If stunning doesn't kill, would you accept it as halal? If it's proven beyond reasonable doubt. So I'll let somebody else speak.
Awal Fusuni has put this forward, and this is a very important question because reality is, these are the kind of intricate questions that we need to really think about.
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely.
So there's two really important questions for me anyway, as somebody who's coming into this area. I don't know. I've not really looked into this in a lot of research or detail, but they're the two most obvious questions, and I will focus on the second question that Dr. Fusuni's put forward. So I don't know if Mufti Abdullah is with us. Mufti Abdullah, are you with us? I think Mufti Abdullah is not with us.
Yes,
so
I am here.
I am here. Oh, you are with us. SubhanAllah. Okay, right. So Mufti Abdullah, so the question is, why do Muslim scholars not accept stunning? I want you to sort of think about this from the perspective of your opinion, your understanding, and also generally the kind of understandings that different scholars actually have about this issue. Why do they differ on this issue of stunning? Why is stunning a real issue for them?
So I think there's a number of aspects to look at, as our esteemed doctor has pointed out as well. What type of species are we referring to? What type of stunning are we referring to? And also, as our esteemed doctor has pointed out, there's a difference between the ruling for the act of stunning itself, meaning, is it permissible? Is it makruh? Is it halal is it impermissible for a Muslim to engage in the act of stunning, versus the status of the animal itself? So there's a number of issues at play here. And also the issue is reliable scientific research. As our esteemed doctor pointed out, the main issue is, can we say for sure that the animal is alive at the time of it being stunned? And as our doctor pointed out, what is the universal or unanimous definition of death? So due to all these factors and due to all these nuances, that's why there's such a difference of opinion with regards to animals that are stunned, accepting animals which are stunned, and accepting animals which are not stunned. I would say at the same time, the safest practice would always be not to stun, right? And if an organization can promote that, for example, the Jews do not allow stunning in any shape, form whatsoever. And the Jews, they've been successfully able to slaughter animals in large quantities throughout the world. So there's a lot of issues being discussed here. And I think also the relationship between stunning and machine slaughter is something we need to analyze as well.
Okay, so we're going to come to machine slaughtering in a second, because that opens up another kind of worms. But before we get into that, I think let's just emphasize this point much more clearly. So, for clarity purposes, now there's an issue with stunning. The issue with stunning is that the animal may end up before slaughter in a state which could be considered as dead. Now, then the other issue there is, what is the definition of death, in particular when in relation to animals, because we have this concept of what we call harakat al-mazbuh. So this is the movements that you have within animals who are slaughtered, and even those involuntary movements are considered as, the animal is considered as dead according to the Sharia. So if you look in the fiqh books, that's how we would describe some of these animals. Even though they're involuntary movements, they're not actually voluntary. That's an interesting concept. This is an area that I have a real lot of interest in, but more so in relation to humans rather than in animals. But that's we won't go into the details of that too much. Now, I'm going to go to Sheikh Yunus. Sheikh Yunus, you're somebody who chairs the HMC, a very successful monitoring organization, a very trustworthy monitoring organization. People have put a lot of trust in this organization in terms of the ability to give us some kind of assurance that the food that we have and the meat that we consume has been slaughtered in the right particular way. Focusing mainly on the issue of stunning more, and then we'll talk about machine slaughter later on. Give us a bit of an idea about what is the main role of your organization? What is it that you guys do to ensure that the meat that lands on our table is actually halal?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Jazakallah for this webinar. I think it's a really important subject that we're discussing, and I just want to touch upon a few subjects, a few points that I've already touched and questions you've asked. And I thank Dr. Hussaini, a very good friend, and I think his research is really, really helpful. And just to mention, he has written a paper on this, which you will be interested, Dr. Rafaqat, on brain death or cardiorespiratory death in animals. And that's available online, and Dr. Awal Hussaini will send you that paper. And I think that's a very important paper which people should read, and he might even put the link in the comments actually. And also, so I think, you know, the first question that you asked, that's the most important question. Why are there differences within halal? Why is it that people are talking about halal in terms of is stunning allowed, not stunning allowed, mechanical slaughter allowed, mechanical slaughter not allowed, you know, etc. So the real reason is technology and industrialization, right? So we live in a different time to how food was being prepared 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, right? Because of the industrialization of the meat industry and the poultry industry, this is why there's difference of opinion. That's the bottom line, number one. And then the question is, what part of industrialization and technology can we accept as conducive to halal methodology, and what part of technology and industrialization can we not accept as conducive to halal methodology? And that's where the scholars will differ, okay? We at HMC have taken the opinion, and it's not, and I'm not saying that other opinions don't exist, but we've taken, as Mufti Abdullah has mentioned, we've taken an opinion which we feel is the most safest opinion, in terms of we don't accept mechanical slaughter as something which is conducive to halal, number one, because before any mechanical slaughter happens, stunning has to happen. People need to understand this. There is no mechanical slaughter without stunning, right? Number two,
and that's a really important point, actually, and that's
very,
something that
very
we need to emphasize.
What people don't understand,
people misunderstand that.
Yeah,
they misunderstand that.
People don't understand what goes on. So the question is, can there be mechanical slaughter without stunning? No, they can't. And
no, they can't.
Kind of stunning happens. That's an issue which Dr. Hussaini mentioned as well. There are different methods and different ways of stunning on different species. The current method, or the previous method that was happening in poultry, in chickens, was water bath stunning. For some time now, the European Scientific Agency has said this method is harmful for animals. Previously, it used to say to us that this method is very, very good for animals and you should all adopt this. Then suddenly in 2011,
when you say very good, because I'm clarifying it for the audience, when you say very good, you mean that it will reduce their pain?
It will reduce
their anxiety.
And
you know that animals get anxious as well. That's clear knowledge that animals can get anxious. So it will reduce their pain and their anxiety. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And it's the best method for animals to be slaughtered. That's what they used to say. Then the European Scientific Agency has said that no, you know, you should move away from that and you should start gas stunning, right? So gas stunning is now the method that's being promoted, and it's being implemented strongly in nearly all of the places in Europe, in UK, in Canada, in America. And it's much more quicker and much more less expensive for the slaughterhouses. But as Dr. Hussaini mentioned, every gas stunning that's done, the law is that it has to be killed before slaughter. It has to be dead before slaughter. So that animal is haram. That animal is haram. And a lot of people don't know this. So I'm just trying to say to people that there are lots of differences out there. The differences have happened because of technology and industrialization. And then the different certification bodies, the Muslim certification bodies, they have adopted different standards. Some have said we accept stunning. Some have said we accept stunning only in bigger animals. We don't accept stunning in smaller animals because it's too risky. Some have said that we accept mechanical slaughter. Some have said we don't accept mechanical slaughter. What HMC has done, and now I will go to your question, is HMC right from the outset said we will take away all the different controversial elements that are out there, and we will only adopt those elements that are non-controversial. So we will introduce only Muslim slaughtering, hand slaughtering, 3 out of the 4 veins have to be cut, no stunning, no mechanical slaughter. And on top of that, ours in UK, our organization is the only one that puts at least one person in the slaughterhouse every single day. Every single day. Okay. And then the shops that are certified by HMC, they can only be certified if they agree that the only meat, fresh meat and poultry that they will be selling is HMC certified, so that it does not confuse.
In other words, 100% of the meat that they sell will be HMC certified.
Fresh meat and sold poultry.
Okay.
The frozen one will have stickers on there which will identify which is HMC and which is not HMC. And that is not because we want a monopoly. It is because we want to make sure that when the consumer goes inside the shop, then they know that what they're buying is HMC. We don't want mixing going on, right? Now, the problem that we have is HMC only covers maybe 5% of the market. Yeah, although we are very well recognized because people who are conscious about the food that they eat, they will make sure that they eat HMC. But we only cover 5% of the market. The 95%, the rest of the market, majority of it is unregulated in the UK.
Right.
Unregulated. It will say halal, but you as a consumer will not know whether it was stunned, whether it was mechanically slaughtered, whether it came from Brazil, whether it came from Denmark, whether it came from Belgium, whether it came from Thailand or wherever, you will not know. And whether you know the country or not, you will not even know what the standard was which was used, because there are so many standards that are used. Was it mechanically slaughtered? Was it stunned? Was it slaughtered by a Muslim? Was it slaughtered by a non-Muslim? You don't know. And it's one of the most unregulated areas in this country is the word halal. So
we're living in a world now where we need to produce meat for consumption at a economically, a large level. So we need to really bring up food out there because there's a serious amount of consumption of meat now. I was reading an article not too long ago about meat consumption in the UK, and we have 5% of the population of UK is Muslim, and they consume more than 20%. I may be even wrong here, maybe be more than that.
25%
of the meat in the UK. Sorry?
25% of the lamb. Dr. Fusaini knows
25% of the lamb.
Dr. Fusaini knows these figures at the back of his hand here. But just to mention, I think I know what question you're coming to. How do we then mass produce, right? And do we have to go mechanically or do we not? Like I said, industrialization.
That will become vegetarian.
So industrialization and technology, Muslims or scholars are not against industrialization or technology.
Yes.
Let's make that clear. Because sometimes when we say that, we don't agree with mechanical slaughter, then people machine slaughter, people will say, see, he's backward, they don't agree with industrialization, they don't agree with technology. It's not about that. There's lots of technology that's being used already, but is it conducive to halal? That's the main question. Is it conducive to making sure that the animal that we are slaughtering is still halal? That's the main question. That's the biggest question. And those technology that is used and it still makes allows the animal to remain halal, we will continue. We will allow that to happen. But that technology which will make that animal haram, we will not allow that to happen. So in going to your question, can we still mass produce with hand slaughter? Mufti Abdullah will tell you, Dr. Awal Fusaini will tell you, and I will tell you that there are many slaughterhouses around the world that are mass producing and they are hand slaughtering and not using mechanical slaughter. Yes, the difference is, and this is a real issue, is the economical difference. One slaughterhouse will say, well, you know, if I do mechanical slaughter, I don't have 10 overheads doing the slaughter.
Yeah.
And here I have 10 overheads.
So it's about the labor force.
It's about the economy and the profits.
The number of people you employ to do that. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's some really, really important points to what you mentioned there. And, you know, we can go into a lot more detail in some of those points. So, but the main point to take from this is HMC is a monitoring organization which works on the concept of ihtiyat. Okay. So they are working on a cautionary measure that, look, there is some difference of opinion, but some of the differences of opinion are such that we're not even going to accept some of those opinions, yeah, because they are beyond even our red lines, yeah. But there are others which are acceptable to some degree, but we have our assurance, we need our own assurance, and we need to be in a state caution. So on the basis of caution, then we're going to be, you know, much more stringent with our conditions, which is good for the consumer. It's good for the consumer. So because that will then encompass a number of different consumers and, you know, appeal to everybody. So you'll fulfill everybody's conditions, I suppose, as opposed to some slaughter monitoring committees, which fulfill some of those conditions, don't fulfill others, whereby certain consumers may not be satisfied with those conditions. So absolutely, that's where the problem arises. Yeah.
The other issue, which I really need to emphasize, especially in the UK and other parts of the world, we know that these are controversial issues in terms of there are differences of opinion within the scholars. Majority of the scholars that I have read do not agree with mechanical slaughter. And yet my issue is that those who are producing mechanical slaughter chickens are not clear and are not clarifying and are not open to say, this is how we're producing. And then the consumer makes their choice. And that's not fair. That's not fair on the consumer. Yeah, it's not ethical. That if we know that this is a controversial method, then at least let your consumers know. And then they will make the choice whether they want to eat that or not. Yeah.
Be clear with the facts. Be clear with the facts.
Yeah, be clear.
Okay, so Dr. Foussini, let's come to you, because we need a scientific sort of perspective to all this. Because there is a lot of talk at the moment, and there's a bit of fear-mongering going on in some countries where certain states and governments are making statements, or certain individuals are making statements, that Islamic slaughter is cruel. There's an element of cruelty to animals. And hence they're pushing this agenda that they may think about mandatory stunning as a means to overcome this sense of cruelty. Now, from somebody of your background who can give us the scientific view, and I know you put this question to some of the ulama in your sort of survey, and they responded in certain ways. What is the evidence for that? Is stunning something that assures us that animals do not, number one, feel pain, and also that they don't feel any sense of anxiety? Is there evidence for this? And the other point to make here is the Islamic, traditional Islamic slaughtering. Is that cruel to animals? Do they feel serious pain from that? Is it a sense of anxiety for them? Are there issues there? Is there any truth to what some of these people are claiming?
Thank you again, Dr. Rafakat. That's another very important question. So if you were to ask me whether stunning is a humane process, I'll be very cautious in giving you an answer. If you look at all the scientific papers that exist, what most of the clever scientists will say, stunning is humane if applied correctly. Now, let's take gas stunning again. Gas stunning is supposed to knock animals unconscious, but we know from scientific evidence that it is not a humane method of stunning. The reason why is in the EU legislation, EC 1099/2009, it says if you are applying a method of stunning, that method of stunning should not be aversive should not be uncomfortable to the animal. However, the evidence showed that when you expose chicken or pigs, or sorry, if you didn't want to hear about pigs, but pigs are animals that are also slaughtered. So I'm just giving it as
into the same category of discussion, isn't it? So yeah.
So if you expose them to a gaseous mixture, evidence has shown that carbon dioxide is a very aversive gas. The European Food Safety Authority is aware of this. The UK government is aware of this, and governments around the world are aware of it. They know it's not a humane stunning process, but it is still used.
So they use carbon monoxide. Is that right?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. Okay.
So it's a gas. So they will expose the animals to it. The animals.
But they suffocate them.
Sorry.
So they suffocate them. They suffocate them.
In a way, and some of them, if you look at them, you see them gasping for air, which is not a comfortable process. So that is one example where many people will be very cautious to just tell you, oh, this blanket, give a blanket statement and say stunning is halal. Now take mechanical stunning as well. Mechanical stunning, we know there is a high incidence of misstuns. So mechanical stunning is where you shoot the head of the animal with what we call a captive bolt. So captive because you shoot the animal, a bolt come out, and then captive. It goes back to the gun again. So the bolt, a metal rod will come out of the gun, penetrate the skull of the animal, and penetrate into the brain to destroy the brain. That has been shown in some instances to not be effective. There are some misstuns associated with it. If you bring water bath stunning as well, so you also ask me whether non-stun is humane or is good. So now let's take the way we slaughter chicken, whether with stunning or without stunning. If you take the chicken, so let's assume this my phone is the chicken, and the chicken is standing on its feet like this. Before you slaughter the chicken, you have to first of all invert it. You invert the chicken and put its feet in metal shackles. Now we know chicken do not have a diaphragm. For those of us who understand a bit of anatomy, humans have got diaphragm, which prevents our viscera or our internal organs. So when I turn upside down, my internal organs will not all rush to my chest. But if you do the same to chicken, all the internal viscera will move to the carotid cavity, and that can prevent breathing difficulties. So first of all, you are inverting it, which is unnatural. It's not good for the welfare of the animal. You are shackling it. You are putting the feet into metal shackles, which is not good for the welfare of the animal because it can cause breakage of bones of the legs. So, and this is common during slaughter with and slaughter without stunning, and it's because of mass production. You want to get as many chicken as possible through the process. So that is one mishap of slaughter without stunning. Just to reiterate this point, you're talking about a situation which is ideal. Now let's think about producing a mass production of this, where clearly on the line of something that you're slaughtering so many chickens a second probably, that there is serious amount of possible error that can be made in a situation like that, which is quite troubling. Okay. So we slaughter, so put that into perspective. We slaughter, many abattoirs in Europe will slaughter between 12,000 and 20,000 chicken an hour. Wow. 12,000 to 20,000 chicken per hour. That's just one slaughter, one abattoir slaughtering. Compare that to sheep and goats, that is the volume or the amount of animals that are actually slaughtered in a whole week in a big abattoir. So the chicken is a massive problem, and I've just highlighted the fact that they are inverted, which is not a natural process. Their legs are shackled in metal shackles, which can cause breakage of bones and very painful to the animals as well. And that is possible or that is common during slaughter with and slaughter without stunning. That is another way, another issue we need to address. But the only way we can address it is if we are prepared to reduce the amount of chicken meat that is produced.
Okay. We're going to talk about solutions in a short while, so we need you here, so don't go away. We're going to come back to you because solutions are important here as well, aren't they? We're not just here to explain the problem. Now, we're going to go to Mufti Abdullah Nana. We talked about slaughtering now, okay? So mechanical slaughtering in particular. So we know that there are situations because we're producing some of this consumption of meat at mass scales of it, yeah. Because as well, we recognize that Muslims are real consumers of meat. We like our meat. So on the basis of that, what are the real, from the Islamic perspective, what are the problems with this idea of? So I remember I talked about this in the verse of the Quran. So basically, invoking Allah's name and all these different things, inshallah, when we're slaughtering. What issue do we have with this mechanical slaughtering? And Dr. Fusin has, eloquently explained the different approaches and some of the technical issues that arise from a scientific perspective that we could even make a claim that this is, problematic. I know you're driving, so I don't really want to take your mind off your driving. But generally speaking, just on the basis of that, Mustafa, if you could just explain what are the Islamic issues with this? What kind of things are we concerned about from an Islamic perspective?
I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm currently traveling in Maryland. But yes, Dr. Saab, to summarize the issues, from a fiqh point of view and from a legal point of view, there are some major concerns with regards to mechanical slaughter. And as our previous speakers have pointed out, there is some controversy, there is some difference of opinion. I would say the main concern with mechanical slaughter, or the main concerns will fall into three categories. Number one is the issue of the recitation of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, eat that meat upon which the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was recited. On this basis, many of the schools of thought require that the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be read, or at least recommend that the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be read on every single animal that's being slaughtered. Likewise,
So,
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
just going back to this point, Mufti Saab, do we need to invoke Allah's name on every single slaughter?
Yes.
This is a very important point because this is something that
explicitly mentioned in the books. This is explicitly mentioned in the books, and Mufti 𝐁𝐿 in fact argues, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرْ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. He argues, applying our rules of Arabic and interpretation of the Quran, ma is general. Do not eat that meat upon which the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not recited. That meat, in the word used for that meat is general. In other words, do not eat any meat upon which the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not recited. Yes, at the same time, we do respect the Shafi madhab and the difference of opinion in this regard. At the same time, for the remaining madahib and for the remaining scholars of fiqh, there will be a major concern with machine slaughter and how this requirement is fulfilled.
So we say the
because with the
Jumhur opinion
machine
is that basically for every slaughter. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And now what happens with the machine slaughter is in certain slaughterhouses, they will assign a person to stand there and say Bismillah, 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 like I'm doing. But as Mufti 𝐁𝐿 has pointed out, that individual is not slaughtering. That individual has nothing to do with the process. So his standing there and saying Bismillah cannot count for the slaughterman in a regular slaughter procedure, first taking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and slaughtering. So for the number one, this is a concern with mechanical slaughter. Number two, the issue would be that no mechanical slaughter, as far as we know, is completely devoid of manual labor. You still need a backup. And many a times...
I know that we have even tape recordings of people who play the tape recording.
Agreed. So for the tasmiyah,
Bismillah being recited numerous times.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the second issue which I'm referring to is backup slaughter. So what do we mean by this? Generally, with even with mechanical slaughter, it's not flawless. And roughly, let's say about 15 to 25% of chickens, duck, or they are not slaughtered by the knife, right?
Okay.
So at times you need another human being. So even with the machine, you need a human being as a backup, whose job is to make sure that no chickens are missed. And if any chicken is missed by chance, that individual will still cut that animal. So is this individual a Muslim, or is this individual reciting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., etc.? So this issue of the backup slaughterment also comes up as well. And thirdly, according to what Sheikh Ramadan Bhuti has pointed out, in the Shafi school of thought, intention of the slaughterman is key. And when you have a machine, how is that intention being played out? Because the machine is not a human being. The machine cannot make an intention like you and I can make an intention. So as a result, this requirement is also questionable. So these are the three main questionable aspects when it comes to machine slaughter. And that's why many scholars have concerns about the validity of machine slaughter.
So just to reiterate those 3 points, the second point in particular, so you talked about the individual who's basically slaughtering, and you mentioned and you qualified that it would be a Muslim. What about Ahlul Kitab? Because I know there is a mention of Ahlul Kitab.
So I apologize.
What do you understand by Ahlul Kitab?
Yes. So I purposely didn't want to go into much detail, so we avoid the discussion right now on the food of the people of the book. Do today's Jews and Christians meet that requirement? But yes, from a technical point of view, Dr. Faqat, as the Quran is also pointing out, if a Jew or a Christian, or a believing Jew or a Christian, were to carry out the slaughter, it would also be valid. It could be a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian.
So a Jew or a Christian would not necessarily use the word Allah or Bismillah, and they would not actually invoke by that particular statement. What would we be accepting in this particular instance? Are we accepting certain wordings, or what's just briefly, what is acceptable in that particular instance? So we can have somebody who's a Christian in their belief, and recognizing like we have our Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that Christian would actually fall within their Ahl of Ahl Kitab. Could they say, by the name of God, and would that suffice?
Yes.
Okay.
And as Ibn Kathir points out in his tafsir, that originally when Jews and Christians would slaughter, they would also take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لأنهم لا يذكرون على ذبائحهم إلا اسم الله. And of course, as you pointed out, Dr. Rufaqat, translation, there are multiple ways to say the name of Allah in different languages, right?
Yes.
So acknowledging that difference of translation in different languages, as long as the name of Allah is mentioned, or God is mentioned, it would also be fine.
Okay. Going back to Sheikh Yunus. So Sheikh Yunus, we got a number of conditions here, stringent conditions, in fact. Now, what is it that we can advise halal monitoring committees, for example, that do exist out there, and they're doing a fantastic job, that ensures that our meat is halal? What systems are in place? What systems do you have to assure us as consumers that, or processes that you have? And this is for the benefit of other people. I know we have a couple of individuals who have joined us today as a part of our audience, who actually run other organizations, monitoring organizations elsewhere in the world. So they're interested as well. So what procedures, because your HMC is quite successful in what it does, what procedures, what assurances do you have? What do you do to ensure that those individuals that you put on the ground, that are your agents in this sense, they're doing the right thing, considering with these kind of conditions that we talked about earlier on? What kind of assurance do we have? Because this is a common question. People do ask this question.
No, absolutely. So I think any certification organization, I think it needs to have its intention correct, right? Some organizations are there to make money for themselves. Some organizations, I never say that they can't make money, or individuals might make money, but the intention should be that they are creating a certification organization for the community. The whole intention should be for the community. So Alhamdulillah, ours is a not-for-profit organization. Me as a chairman or none of the board or any of the directors benefit in any way from this organization. This is a solely Muslim community focused organization. So that's number one. Number two, accountability. So number two is transparency and then accountability. So transparency in the sense that we need to be very clear that what are the standards that we are implementing, right? So what are the halal standards we are implementing? What monitoring standards we are implementing? How many times we are visiting the slaughterhouses? How many times we are visiting these shops, restaurants, etc. And what standards have we given in terms of halal, non-stunned, non-mechanical slaughter, etc., etc. And that is all very clear on our website. So transparency is extremely important, right? So not for profit, not for personal gain. Number two, transparency. Number three, accountability. We are accountable to the Muslim community, right? There's lots of people who have asked us questions about our accounts. We don't shy away from those questions. I've gone on many webinars and many interviews to say, here, this is our accounts. If you want to come and see our accounts, come to our office and we'll show you our accounts right from the beginning, right? If you've got any questions about any issues that have happened in the past, we are here to answer those questions, right? So accountability should be there. Sometimes I get questions, Maulana Sahib, I saw a truck visit this shop and I saw a non-Muslim delivering what was happening. We don't shy away with those questions. We will then investigate and we will find out whether it was a delivery person who was non-Muslim, where the meat came from, where the poultry came from. Everything is there. So we want the Muslim community to be our eyes and ears for the Muslim community. If you see something that HMC is doing wrong, you tell us, yeah, and we will try and put that right. We are not perfect. Yeah, there's police out there, and yet there's robberies going on, and there's stealing going on, and there's crime going on. HMC is there. Cheating will still go on in the halal industry. But what we will do is we will minimize that cheating by our presence. Yeah, and
Okay.
so three main things I've mentioned: not for profit, not for personal gain. Number two, be transparent, and number three, be accountable.
So, I mean, that's a good, nice triad of real accountability, responsibility, and so forth. So clearly recognizing that you cannot achieve perfection in anything. So, but the main point here is that you can at least aim for perfection in terms of how you are accommodating, such stringent conditions are really required in terms of ensuring that the meat that we have is slaughtered in a halal way and it's produced in a halal sort of way on our tables. So, so in essence, we can't be expected to fulfill every single condition, but rather, we can have some kind of assurance that things are working according to a process and a system, and we try our best to ensure that the people on the ground are delivering on that process and the system. So I'm assuming that they undergo training as well. The people that are on the ground, they undergo
absolutely.
training.
So, at the beginning, when HMC started, there was lots of accusations that your staff do not know anything. So we've got a training package for every single member of our staff, whether it's health and safety, whether it's understanding halal, customer service. All of these different elements are put in place before a person starts with HMC.
By the way, the policing is not necessarily just by yourselves, but you're expecting the community to put that forward to you as well. If they see anything that's not right, then
absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever you see and you think that it's not right, let us know. But I don't like to use the word policing because we're not there for police. We're there for to help the Muslim community to try and eat halal as genuinely as possible.
Okay. Right. We've got a bit of time where I can talk to you. I know because some of the questions that are coming through, they're related to some of the questions I'm putting forward to you anyway. They fall in the same sort of theme. So I'm just going to ask you one set of questions, and inshallah we'll open it to the audience. So going back to Dr. Awal Husseini, let's think about solutions here. Now, from your understanding, from your survey of ulama and what their understanding is, and from what's been discussed here, it can be quite difficult in some countries, especially when the state sort of expects certain things in terms of they expect you to stun or whatever. Is there a compromise somewhere here? Is there somewhere we can compromise? Is there a system that we can bring in that may accommodate everyone?
I think from halal perspective, there are ways we could improve the process. So for instance, I mentioned about the shackling and inversion of birds. If there is a way we can find, if there's a way we can find a way around it to still maintain speeds, I think that will be a good thing. Also, when it comes to the restraint of small ruminants, so small ruminants in the UK and in most industrialized economies, they are restrained by V restraint. Mufti Abdullah Nana, I don't know whether in the US, whether you guys use the V restraint to restrain your small ruminants. So sheep and goats, how do you restrain them before slaughter? That is one area.
Yeah. Normally they use kosher pen. So the kosher pen is they'll either use stunning or they'll also use the kosher pen. Okay.
Yeah. So in the UK we use the V restraint, and it's illegal to slaughter a cow by putting it on its side or putting it on its back. But in some EU countries it's accepted. So in order to speed, if you want to make economic sense through the process and also still comply with halal, I think the best way is to focus on the method of restraint, training of slaughtermen so that they know how to use the knife properly, how to knowing where the blood vessels are so that they can cut the right blood vessels. And that's something I've stressed time and time again in some of my papers, that Muslim slaughtermen, Islamic scholars need to understand what they are cutting, because if you are slaughtering an animal, you should be able to tell yourself, oh, what am I looking at? So let me briefly just explain the anatomical differences between sheep and cattle. So if you look at a sheep, all the blood vessels are here. So all the blood vessels are in the front of the animal. So the carotid arteries will send blood from the heart to the brain, whilst that is oxygenated blood, whilst the jugular veins send a deoxygenated blood from the brain to the heart. And they are all here. So if you have a very sharp knife, a well-trained slaughterman, and they do a very clean cut, within 4 seconds, and I repeat, 4 seconds, the animal should lose sensibility. The reason is, as I said, the main blood vessel carrying blood to the brain is the carotid artery. If you cut the carotid artery, blood can no longer travel from the brain from the heart to the brain. So this is a technique we could use. If we train people properly, we could convince the authorities that, look, these guys know what they are doing. They know how to sharpen their blade. They know how to cut the blood vessel. And another thing is, if you train in them, we need to let our slaughtermen know that once you do the neck cut and keep the wound open, you should be able to see blood oozing from 2 pipes from the body out of the body. If that is not happening, that means you haven't done it properly. You've left one carotid artery intact, and the animal will stay alive for a long time. Take cattle, for instance. Cattle have got an additional, so in addition to the carotid and the jugular veins, they've got an additional vessel running along the back called the vertebral artery. So no matter how clever you are, no matter how well trained you are, you cannot cut it. So if you observe cattle and sheep, when you do the clean cut, even if you are trained properly, the animal will have some brain function for some time. So instead of the 4 minutes, between 4 and 20 seconds, sorry, if I said 4 minutes, I'm wrong. It's 4 seconds, between 4 seconds and 20 seconds, the animal should lose consciousness. So that is very quick. So some people, if
Can I just re-emphasize a point? Because I have heard people say this.
Yeah.
And I need to sort of clarify this point amongst our scholars here as well.
Yeah.
Because some people have even said that, why don't you just make it easy? Why don't you just behead the animal? People have said this. You know, okay. This statement has been used. I'm sure you've heard this. So, I mean, there is, it's important for us to emphasize the etiquettes of slaughter, which have been very clearly mentioned by, you know, scholarly opinion, and there is consensus on this, that there are certain approaches that we must go and through which we must slaughter. So these beheading would be something which is a disliked process. Even though the animal will be halal, it's not considered as within the tradition of Islam to actually do this to animals. Okay. I need to clarify that point because some people
Yeah.
do think like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as I explained, if we can do the training properly, sharpen our knives properly, we can do the cut very cleanly, and within 4 seconds, between 4 seconds and 20 seconds, we know the animal is gone. However, that will also depend on how we define death, because even if the animal is gone, is unconscious, is gone, the heart will still be beating, and the heart can continue to beat for up to 8 minutes. So I lean towards the brain death rather than the cardiorespiratory death. And also in talking about the anatomical difference, let me just arrive at this point. Talking about the anatomical differences with cattle having the vertebral artery, what some Muslims have done, and this is a question I think scholars need to look at again. What they do is they will do the halal cut or the ventral neck cut, then follow it with what is called a chest stick. As to whether the chest stick is halal, most scholars need to debate it properly. But the advantage of the chest stick is that when you do the chest stick, there is a major blood vessel called the brachiocephalic trunk. The brachiocephalic trunk is the main one that sends blood from the heart to the brain. So once you cut it, you stop blood from moving from the heart totally. But as to whether it's halal or not, and with that method, within 8 seconds, even cattle will lose consciousness.
And it's an interesting point, actually, that you talk about. And in the Sharia, the emphasis on slaughter is not about taking the heart out of the animal or, stopping the heart. It's actually about ensuring that those blood vessels that supply the brain, you cut them clearly, so that basically that perfusion and the blood supply to the brain cuts off immediately. That's an analogy that many scholars use in accepting even brain death in humans to some degree. And clearly, even after that, you can get involuntary movements that occur in such animals, but that is still considered as death according to the Sharia for those particular animals. So that's a very, very important point. So we're looking at, in essence, ensuring that individuals who are slaughtering are trained up to ensure that they do this in the proper Sharia way to do it, because we can talk about Sharia in the theory, and we can also talk about how people abuse that. They don't necessarily follow the Sharia. They claim they do, but they don't do it according to those etiquettes. And we need to be very careful. We distinguish between the two. There is a lot of bad practice out there, and they're clearly, if they did it according to these etiquettes of the Sharia, then Dr. Fusuni has explained to us that this animal would undergo the least amount of pain and suffering as a result of the slaughter. And we talked even about the fact that, I understand that even from the medical perspective, that if I was to knock you out in one blow by cutting your carotid artery on both sides of your neck, then you would fall unconscious immediately. You would not feel any pain. Yeah. So this is an important point to raise. Now, having said that, going back to this point, so we just go to Mufti Abdullah Nana. From a Sharia perspective, how does that sound? Can we compromise here? Can we say that, look, this is the way to do it? Now, what I want you to do is, you've got a few minutes. I want you to sell this to the slaughterhouses out there. So from a Sharia perspective, just fulfill the minimum of these few categories, and inshallah, your slaughtering would be sound, and there would be no problem.
Yes. So, Dr. Fakat, I've had the unique opportunity to set up a large-scale chicken slaughterhouse in America from scratch.
Okay.
And during this experience, we've been able to see hands-on what it takes to convert a facility from mechanical slaughter to hand slaughter. And really, it's incremental cost. It's an incremental cost, pennies. So with a large facility that has 1,000 workers already. So keep in mind, they have the top of the line equipment, they have machinery, deboning, defeathering, and they already have 1,000 people working there using the latest technology to prepare that chicken for you as a final product. Bringing 10 to 15 slaughtermen is enough to set up a proper hand slaughter program in that plant. And when you have 1,000 workers, 10 to 15 extra workers, $20 an hour, really it's an incremental cost. So it can be done. We've been successful in setting up hand slaughter programs. As a disclaimer, I do wish to say this. Every country is different, and the laws of stunning are also different. In the UK, as you have mentioned, the practice is the gas stunning and stun to kill. In Europe, the trend tends to be stun to kill. That is not the case in America and North America. Our stunning procedures are different. Our government is also different. For example, gas stunning is not common in America right now. Gas stunning is not common in America. So our halal organization, the Halal Food Standards
Just to re-emphasize this point, Mufti Saab, there are exception clauses. So even in the UK, for religious purposes, they allow those exceptions.
Yes. But my point is, as a whole, when we examine Europe or the UK, the phenomenon, the trend is stun to kill. And in America, it's a little bit different. As I said, gas stunning is still not common. And the phenomenon of stun to kill is not common in America. Right. So just pointing out the differences and nuances. So going back to our halal organization, the Halal Food Standards Alliance of America, also known as HFSAA, HFSAA, our theological board looked at our current situation and looked at the need of the industrial halal procedures, and we do accept stunning on a limited basis. And anyone who's interested, inshallah, can look at our standards and can contact our board. So our policy is on a restricted basis with certain requirements, we do allow stunning. And now going back to the hand slaughter procedure, we do agree with HMC, we do agree with many of the major halal boards across the world to emphasize hand slaughter, right? To emphasize hand slaughter. And as Sheikh Yunus also pointed out, hand slaughter is acceptable by all. It's a non-controversial method. Machine slaughter, right? A good percentage of scholars do not accept it. Some do, but you do end up in controversy. So that is why we promote the higher standard. If we move to the higher standard, it's acceptable to all. And as I pointed out, only those people who are in the industry, who go to slaughterhouses, they will understand hand slaughter is still practical. Hand slaughter, at least with stunning. So let me add that. Hand slaughter with stunning can still meet the needs for the high demand and industrial processes. And we have seen plants where over 200,000 or 100,000 chickens are slaughtered in one day. We have seen plants, even in, someone asked about South Africa. South Africa has 3 million chickens slaughtered by hand a day. 3 million, right? In America, we're still not at those numbers, but we see the need for providing reliable hand-slaughtered options for the Muslim community. And my appeal to countries all over the world is to revive the hand slaughter procedure. It is possible. It is still practical. And human beings, mashallah, I describe it as man versus machine. So Dr. Faqat, I have spent time in the slaughterhouses and watched the mechanical slaughter side by side with hand slaughter, right? You could have two lines operating at the same time. So one line is machine slaughter, one line is hand slaughter. There is a difference. I call it the human touch. A human being can feel the animal. The human being knows how much pressure to put, not to overcut. If it's a bigger animal, then you adjust. If it's a smaller animal, you adjust. The machine does not do so. The machine is set at one frequency. So the human being can make sure that the neck is not cut off all the way, which is disliked in makruh. The human being can check and see if the animal is moving, or kind of see if the movement is limited in the animal. So hand slaughter, I truly believe and recommend that Muslims insist on hand slaughter. Muslims make that decision to eat hand slaughter. And when Muslims as a whole will ask for hand slaughter, then the industry will change to accommodate those needs. In the world we're living in, the customer is the king. And when Muslims as a whole are more educated and they are concerned about eating halal and they ask for hand slaughter, inshallah, you will see the changes at the slaughterhouse level. You will see the changes at the restaurant level, and you also see the rest of changes at the store level. And one other solution, Dr. Rafaqat, which I think is also worth mentioning, our current demand for meat is unsustainable. Muslims as a whole, our current consumption of meat is unsustainable. We don't need to eat meat for breakfast, halal chicken for breakfast, tandoori nahari for lunch, and chicken biryani for dinner. As the books of hadith point out, Rasulullah would eat meat once in a while. And this is part of the problem. It's all economics. Because we want an affordable price for meat, and because we want to eat so much meat, right? The only option is going to be to cut corners and go to machine slaughter, right? Because people want the low prices. They want to be able to eat meat 5 times a day, right? Well, at those prices, you're not going to get hand slaughter. You're not going to get unstunned hand slaughter. You're not going to be able to afford it. So we need to rethink our whole outlook on meat and how much meat is going into our system, how much red meat is going into our system, and come up with a more sustainable model which is closer to the Sunnah, right? And many of the senior ulama, even in America, have suggested this, that if we come to a more sustainable model, then we can also afford more quality meat. If we eat less meat, we can afford to pay a little bit more and get quality meat, which is unstunned, which is hand slaughtered, and which is also tayyib and healthy for you to eat as well.
This is a very important point, I suppose you're mentioning. I'll just mention 2 really important points. One is in terms of the amount of the mass production of this meat, which causes a lot of problems in terms of the ethics of how this meat is produced, because it's a financial industry. It's an industry that benefits financially. So clearly, for that reason, you'll get all sorts of people who have a vested interest in this, who don't have Muslim concerns at heart. For them, it's more about producing the right kind of money and benefiting through profit. So on the basis of this, you are going to have many different types of personalities who become part of this process, and that could be very, very problematic. Now, we've talked about the science behind slaughter, but again, like I mentioned right at the beginning, the spiritual aspect of food is a very, very important aspect, and that is in 2 forms. One is our food being halal or tayyib, and the other is basically the amount of consumption. So it's not just Imam Ghazali talks about this in just one of his kitabs about the shahwa that we have, the pleasures that we indulge in. And one of the most fundamental point he talks about is the illnesses of our stomach and how we consume excessive amounts, beyond measure. And that has a huge impact on our spiritual state. It even affects the value and the quality of our ibadah, our worship, even to that degree. So, these are really important points to really know. So if we followed our Sharia not in terms of the zahir, in outward actions, but also from the batin, from the internal actions, then I think that would be a solution to the whole industry of halal meat to some degree, because we'd be producing a certain amount of meat and consumption. I think you're trying to say something, but it's okay, right. Now, I'm just going to go to Dr. Awal, because there's a question here from Iqbal, and he's asking, differentiating between slaughtering large animals and small animals. So, like, for example, on one end, you got, a cow, and then the other end, you've got, a sheep, a chicken. Is there a difference, in terms of the approaches there? Are we shocking them giving them a lot more gas? Are we, shocking them with a lot more energy?
Yeah, there's definitely some difference between the stunning of large animals and also small animals. So normally I would say large, small ruminants, and then poultry. So if we take large ruminants, that is cattle and other bigger animals, you need higher voltage to be able to push the current through the head of the animals to be able to stun it. So they use higher current. However, in terms of, so for those who accept stunning, the safest one would be with large animals. So if you stun a large animal with electrical stunning, for instance, even if you are not careful, the animal will recover before you even slaughter, because they recover, they are big, they recover quicker. If you take small ruminants, sheep and goats, they are similar. So if you use in the UK or EU legislation, it requires that the current must be at least 1 arm. With that 1 arm, that is very unlikely. It is very unlikely that the animal will die from that stun. If is head only if it's electrical head only stunning. However, there is a different type of electrical stunning, which is electrical head to body stunning. So you stun the animal and you then stop the heart with a secondary current. That will stop the heart and that will kill the animal. So many halal certifiers do not accept it. Now you come to chicken, which are smaller, which are more riskier. You can stun them with water bath stunning, or you can even stun them with mechanical stunning with a gun, but it's very uncommon. And also in the UK, there seems to be a move away from water bath stunning, which is relatively safer, to the gas stunning I spoke about, which is very risky. That's the riskiest, because there is a requirement that the animal must be dead in the chamber. And I was very happy to hear Mufti Nana say in America it's not growing, it's not a big thing. My concern is that if we are not careful in the UK and there is a move away from water bath stunning to gas stunning, then we are in trouble, because gas stunning, as I said, the animal must be dead before slaughter.
Now, I'm going to ask you a particular question, Dr. Husseini, because we have Hasi Khan who's made this comment, and he's got a valid point to some degree, I think, because we're trying to make this webinar factual. We're not trying to emphasize too many opinions here. And if you sort of listen to it again, you'll realize that we've tried to really put a point forward there. We've recognized we've got an organization that is using cautionary. They're not stating that everybody else has got haram chicken, or haram meat. So we need to be a bit careful about, those points. So the question is, we're all, we've got probably scholars who have got one understanding of, acceptance, but reality is we've demonstrated that, what all scholars agree upon, the points that all scholars agree upon, the points that scholars differ upon, and those who are willing to take some element of risk. There's a small amount of risk, maybe some element of risk in accepting even stunned, animals to be used for slaughter. Now, from your particular perspective, and meeting up with some of these other scholars who have the less cautious view, let's put it that way, what are your thoughts regarding what kind of things do they say? We're talking about some of the other end now. These are people that you've talked to, maybe scholars, who have the less sort of cautious view. What do they present as their arguments? What's the usual thing that they would normally put forward to us?
Normally, I try not to get to the politics, but we enter into.
We'll avoid the politics.
Yeah. So if you speak to proponents of stunning, so I say proponents of stunning, those who approve stunning, one thing they always say time and time again is that the animal must be alive. Now, it's a tricky thing, and I'll refer you back to my definition of stunning again. Death again. Not until scholars come out to define death, to agree on a definition of death. To be honest with you, anybody who is accepting even gas stunning can convince the consumer that the animal was alive, even though we know the animal is dead, because the bird will have a heartbeat, and they will rely on that heartbeat and say the animal is alive. So I'll throw the question back to you again, Dr. Rafaka. You guys need to come out with a consensus on what death is. Not until we understand that, we cannot accuse anybody of going contrary to the rules.
Okay. So potentially we could get a chicken and we could attach its heart to a life support, and this, even though we've taken its head off, and it would be alive according to some. Absolutely. Yeah. In Africa, I'm originally from Ghana. In Africa, we've got a religion called the traditional African religion, and I'm sure in Asia, there will be some religion like that. So when they worship trees and other things. Sometimes what they do is they just cut off the head of the animal, the bird or the animal. When you cut off the head of the bird, you've detached the brain from the body. I tell you what, the body can start running around for minutes, although the brain is gone. So this is very critical for scholars to come to a consensus. And that is a classic example where they can start the questioning from. So if I cut off the head of an animal and the body is still moving around, heartbeat still okay, bleeding still okay, brain is dead, what is your position? I think the next discussions should focus on this. Okay, so this is an important point. This is a big issue even from the medical ethics perspective as well, in terms of what is considered as death.
Yep.
So it sort of comes to the same kind of point. And a lot of the scholars, including myself actually, have written quite extensively in the subject, and we do bring in the analogy. It's interesting how you're saying this, but we bring in the analogy of slaughtering animals and bringing that as an analogy to the discussion of brain death or not.
Yeah.
And we talk about the issue of harakat al-madbu and hayat al-mustaqirra and so forth. So it's an important discussion and it needs to be had. So I suppose we leave it, we throw the question back at the audience that you need to make that decision yourself. You need to make, support, go with somebody who you trust as somebody with good scholarly opinion, a good understanding of the subject area, and then you need to sort of decide from your own conscience that, you feel that you're doing the right thing, inshallah. Now, on the basis of this, I'm going to allow people to come online, inshallah, and ask questions as well. Which I did say that I was going to. So let me just bring on our list of our audience. So we've got Muhammad Yunus Vora. Can you hear us? I think you've had your hand up for quite a while, so I'm not sure whether you're still there. Muhammad Yunus Vora? No? Okay. Okay, we have Asghar. Asghar, can you hear us? Please only put your hand up if you're able to speak, inshallah. Otherwise, we'll be calling your name out. And okay. So we have Muhammad Talha Rauf.
Yeah, hey, assalamu alaikum. Can everyone hear me?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
All right. So basically, I heard, I don't remember exactly who it was, but they had mentioned that there's a backup process for those chickens who are undergoing mechanical slaughter and don't end up getting cut at all. Like nothing gets cut, and there has to be a backup person to take care of that. What about those chickens which, don't even have a minimum of 2 vessels cut? They got a cut, but the minimum 2, I guess, which I've heard before is required, are not cut at all. What percent? Because then I would assume that percent even goes up.
Okay. So we're looking at Sharia perspective. Mufti Abdullah Nana? So we've only cut one of the, one part of the neck, not the other.
Yeah. So the issue is at these slaughterhouses, they want to make sure that they meet the welfare and animal safety requirements as well. And a main concern for them is to make sure no animals are inhumanely die, or no animals go through pretty much drowned to death. So if you understand the slaughter process, number 1 is the slaughter process, and after a few minutes, the animals will go into a defeathering process and scalding tanks, right? Scalding tanks. So each slaughterhouse wants to make sure that no animals die alive, pretty much, or no animals drown to death. So through whether it's mechanical slaughter or hand slaughter, they want to make sure the animals bleed out properly and die before they go into hot water tanks. Okay, so they will have a USDA inspector. They will reject those chickens. They call them pink birds or cadavers. Any chicken which is not cut properly, they'll reject. They'll throw away. So it's in the best interest of the halal slaughterman and the slaughterhouse to make sure no chickens are missed. So that's why with machine slaughter, they have to keep that backup. If one vessel is cut or 2 vessels are cut, or it's improperly cut, the backup slaughterman will cut the remaining vessels. So you could say it's a goal from all these slaughterhouses to ensure the animal, the necks of the animal are cut properly, and the animal bleeds out completely, and there's no pink birds, because when it's not cut properly, the skin of the animal becomes pink, right? So in all slaughterhouses, there are steps taken to ensure that the animals are cut properly, and there's a backup person standing there to also cut the vessel of the throat. And we have seen in our hand slaughter plants, many a times they're more effective than a machine. That our team of Muslim slaughtermen, man versus machine, their pink bird count is lower than the machine slaughter process.
Okay,
Very
inshallah.
interesting.
So we have a question here also from Hashim Khan, and the question is about the concept of blood flow. Now, this is quite an important point as well, because people do see Islamic slaughter as, in essence, ensuring that all the blood flows, and we don't, because blood is considered as impure in this sense. So first of all, let's look at it from the scientific perspective. Dr. Fassini, when we are stunning or we are using any form of gas stunning, whatever, are we affecting blood flow? Is that an issue?
Thank you very much for the question. Another very important question. To answer this question, one thing we need to realize is that sometimes I come across people who say, oh, you need to remove all the blood from the carcass. If not, it will not be halal. That is not practical. If you slaughter an animal, there is no way you can remove all the blood from the carcass. You can drain all the blood from the carcass. I think the best way to rephrase it is to say we need to drain all the flowing blood. That is possible. Now, as to whether stunning or non-stunning improves blood loss or not, a number of research has been conducted on it. One of the researches, which was done in 2015, was actually a Muslim, and they found that there was no statistical difference between the volume of blood that is lost when animals were stunned with electrical stunning or slaughtered without stunning. Another research carried out in the UK in 2006, 2004, and 2006. I think the 2004 was on sheep and the 2006 was on cattle. It also found that there was no statistical difference between the volume of blood. I'm talking about volume of blood. There may be difference between the rate of blood loss, but there's no statistical difference between the volume of blood that is lost between stunning and non-stunning. And a similar one in 2004 was also carried out by some Turkish scientists. They also found that there was no statistical difference between the volume of blood that was lost when animals were mechanically stunned. When I was talking about that captive bolt, when animals were stunned with that method, and then those that were slaughtered without stunning. So in terms of the science, that is the evidence that is available.
Okay, inshallah. I think you elaborately answered that question, so we'll move on. Now we're just going to a question by Yassine, which I think is again another very important point, a very important question, especially in populations where the Muslims are a minority. Even in some cities in the UK, for example, there's very few Muslims, and there's not as much availability of slaughterhouses and places like that, or meat for consumption, which is halal. Now, from that particular perspective, we do hear about individuals who will go and they will have their meat or their chicken, whatever, slaughtered by non-Muslims who they consider as Ahlul Kitab. So the question here from Yassine is, do we need to take other things into consideration? For example, even though they are Ahlul Kitab, they may be drunk. And there may be an issue of their spiritual state. Would that have an impact on our food? So it's an interesting question, and I think for ulama sometimes it's an easy one to respond to, but I think it needs to be sort of articulated well. So I'm going to pass this to Mufti Abdullah Nana. What were your thoughts regarding that?
So it's an excellent question. Mufti Taqi Usmani has written about this topic in detail. He's written a book called Ahkam al-Dabaih, which I myself have translated to English, the legal rulings of slaughtering animals. So there's a detailed discussion on who are the people of the book, what does it mean for a person to be a believing person in the book, for example, a Jew or Christian by name, or a secular Jew or Christian, or a cultural Jew or Christian versus a believing Jew or Christian. Also, what are the requirements if a Jew or Christian will slaughter the animal? Do they have to follow the same requirements as Muslims do, or do they have some dispensations? And likewise, some of the other related issues. So I would recommend reading up further on this topic. And yes, it would be a concern if someone is drunk while they're slaughtering and they're not in the proper senses. This could potentially affect the validity of the slaughter. And also, are they saying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they're slaughtering as well? So if the Jew or Christian is drunk, they're not in the proper senses. We know that when a person is engaging in the act of worship or slaughtering, they mustn't be in the proper senses.
Now, I think this next question is a really good question. And it's Hashim Khan. I'll mention the name as well. And it's a question that we ask even in medical fiqh, in this sense as well. So Hashim Khan is asking the question. I'll open this up to both Mufti Abdul Nana and also Sheikh Yunus. How certain does one need to be that the animal is alive before slaughter in order for it to be counted as halal? Okay, so this is an epistemic question. In other words, what does the Sharia demand of us? And I'll extend that question further. How certain must we be to ensure that the food that comes, the meat that lands on our table is actually halal according to those strict conditions? So this is a question of certainty, because we live in a practical world, and how does the Sharia accommodate that sense of practicality? I'll open it to any of the two, Sheikh Yunus or Mufti Abdullah. I think Mufti Abdullah. I think Sheikh Yunus. Okay, Mufti Abdullah, if you want to answer that.
So first of all, to recognize the fact that there is a difference of opinion regarding stunning, and as I've mentioned, the HMC and Sheikh Yunus, they've taken the more safer approach, which is to not allow stunning at all. Right? And there are other halal organizations or that are run by ulama, for example, in South Africa, for example, in Canada, and for example, in America. Due to our circumstances and due to our unique system of stunning, we do allow it. Right? So number one, let's acknowledge the fact that there's a difference of opinion, and let's respect these differences of opinion. Now, I've seen an excellent fatwa written by Mufti Usmani with regards to stunning, and specifically on what we refer to alamatul hayat, right? The signs of life, right? And this also relates to some of the research which our respected doctor has also mentioned. What type of death do we consider, right? So the scholars of fiqh have written about this in detail. What is alamatul hayat, right? Meaning, if you slaughter an animal, there's a possibility the animal is dead by the time when you're slaughtering it. And in order for us to say that the animal is halal, what signs of life are found? And I respect the doctor has alluded towards this as well. And Mufti Usmani has also discussed this as well. So there are certain signs to look for, and which a slaughterman can also be trained to look for as well. Did the animal bleed or not bleed? Right. So, Dr. Rafaqat, I'm not a doctor, but there's going to be a difference if the animal's already completely dead by the time it gets to the slaughterman. It will not bleed properly. Right. Also, kind of movements. Right. So, if you're a trained slaughterman and the animal comes to you, it's completely not moving at all. It's limp. Right. So you can feel from the muscle tension. There's certain signs to look for. So Mufti Usmani has discussed this, that in terms of Islamic law, we are held responsible to look for those signs of life. And if those signs of life are not there, yes, the slaughterman can be trained, remove that chicken and remove the animal, and do not and reject that animal because the signs of life are not found. Right? Yes, also when it comes to the slaughtering facilities, keep in mind stunning with our current technology is highly regulated, right? The voltage can be kept at a very set amount, and right, it's a machine. It can be calibrated. It can be adjusted to stay at a certain frequency. And yes, in other parts of the world where the scholarly boards and the halal organizations allow stunning, they do recovery tests. Right? They do recovery tests. And I've seen this in South Africa. We do this in America. So after the animal is stunned, we will take maybe 15 or 20 animals. And we'll take them after the stunning, we'll take them off the line, put them on the ground. And you'll see the animals breathing heavily. It might be asleep, but it's breathing heavily. And maybe after a minute or so, stand up and walk away. Also, when I went to New Zealand, so I've had the good fortune of seeing the slaughter process, both in Australia and New Zealand, for red meat, for lamb and for beef. And of course, they do use stunning. So Australia and New Zealand use stunning across the board. So the real question is reversible stunning versus irreversible stunning. Right? And can the animal recover or not? So with the electric stunning that I saw in New Zealand, they would use the electric shock on the cow. It would temporarily go unconscious, and then it would stand up again. I saw with my own eyes, the cows would stand up again. So yes, there is a process, and those halal organizations that allow stunning, they will now have to take that responsibility to make sure that steps are in place, measures are in place to ensure that the animal is alive at the time of slaughter.
So with Sam, taking that into consideration and looking at it from a very practical perspective, you've given a very good on-the-ground analysis of this, which is really important for us to understand. What we're really saying there is we don't need to have yaqeen. Well, let me emphasize this point. Yaqeen in that we are 100% determined that this animal is dead, alive, for us to say that, you know, this is particular halal, which isn't always feasible. It's not always possible because our science is limited, and also there is some element of human error. Yes. But rather, it would achieve this through the process of ghalabat al-dhann. So as long as we attain a sense of ghalabat al-dhann, would that be right? So if we have a ghalabat al-dhann, which is dominant probability, that we are in our heart, we know that this animal is dead, yeah, and we don't have to achieve haqiqatan, certainty of 100%. Yeah. That would suffice, because we can't be tasked on something that we're not capable of doing. It's only through our human efforts that we can come to that conclusion.
Yes. So, Dr. Rafaqat, I do recognize there's going to be some challenges, right? Yeah. And as a safer approach, if it's possible, I recommend Muslims eat unstunned meat, hand slaughtered unstunned meat, right, when it's possible. That is the safest.
There's caution there, and there's a much more closer level to certainty that we're achieving by doing that. Yeah. Okay.
So the perspective from the other side will be as follows. From the time the animal is stunned to the time the animal is slaughtered is a few seconds. It's a few seconds. So we're not stunning the animal and leaving it there for 4 or 5 minutes, right? And for an animal to die, right, we know generally it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm not a doctor, right? But even if the animal endures a painful shock, especially for chickens, right, it takes a little bit of time, right? There's going to be a process from that shock and recording that shock and so on, and the time period we're talking about here, from the point of slaughter in these large slaughterhouses, from the point of slaughter, from the stunning to point of slaughter is a matter of seconds, right? And yes, the challenge is also if the line speed if we didn't have that need of mass production and we could take our time, especially with red meat, right? It's much easier to know if the animal's alive. With chicken, because we're going through 150 chicken a minute, 150 chickens a minute, there's a lot of practical issues.
Yeah. So more human error if possible. Yeah. Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Mustafa. Now, what I'm going to do is, I recognize we've gone well over time. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to allow one more person to come online. So we've got Abdurrahman Safiyan, and then I want to ask Sheikh Yunus one particular question about HMC, which will sort of elaborate on, I think, about 3 or 4 questions that we've already had in the group. So hopefully I'll do that once. Abdurrahman Safiyan, are you there? No? Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Abdurrahman, where are you from? Before you start your question.
I'm from Ghana.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Yes. Your question?
Yeah. Thank you very much. My question goes to Dr. Awal and possibly Sheikh Mufti Nana. In Ghana, mostly our butchers do hand slaughter, that's direct, without stunning. Unfortunately, immediately after stunning, they do not take time for the animal to completely die or bleed off before they start preparing the carcass. I want to know what ruling is on especially death between that's cutting off the neck and then the animal totally going off before you now start preparing the carcass. Otherwise, you would have seen the animal's neck being cut off, being cut, still bleeding and moving whilst the butchers are working on the animal. I don't know whether my question is clear.
Well, is that
So the period of death.
okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
How long should the animal stay alive or dead after slaughter before the carcass is being prepared or skinned?
Question, Dr. Awal.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, Man Safyan. Yes, I think there is a hadith, as I said, I keep saying I'm not a scholar. There is a hadith that says, do not rush to process the animals until they are completely dead. So that is an important hadith there for us to take inspiration from. But as Dr. Rafakat also said, that when there is movement in the animal after slaughter, whether with stunning or without stunning, it does not necessarily mean the animal is alive. This could be due to spinal reflexes. So the brain is gone, but there are still some spinal reflexes that are going on. I don't know whether the scholars, maybe Sheikh Yunus and Mufti Nana and even Dr. Rafakat could give us an idea of whether there is any Islamic scholarly opinion on the time after neck cut to processing, to removal of the skin and all that. Do we have any time? If not, can we use the legal regulations? So we've got around 120 seconds for chicken in the UK. Is it appropriate enough, or do you think the time should increase slightly?
Well, I'm going to pause you on that point, and that's a really very interesting question. And inshallah, I will make reference to that because we've got a course. Hopefully, will reveal all that information for those of us who are interested, inshallah. So we'll pause it there, inshallah. Just one question to Sheikh Yunus. Sheikh Yunus, HMC, okay, it's moved quite considerably over a short period of time, and it's a success story. It's a story that every one of us wants to see in our different countries. Now, what is the vision for HMC? What is it that you would like it to become? Now, I'm not saying this from a solely biased view. I want you to sort of address this as organizations like this elsewhere in the world. What should they aim to become at the, as a vision here?
Jazakallah. I think for us as HMC, it's the reason why I got involved. I wasn't the founder of HMC. The reason why I got involved in HMC is because what I want is a mechanism and a process where we can help the Muslim community to eat halal, right? And the more Muslims that we can help. At the moment, we don't cover that many. The percentage is very low in terms of the production of halal meat and poultry in the UK, or the provision of halal meat and poultry in the UK. HMC doesn't cover that much percentage. And therefore, what I want is to try and get to a position where we can expand to a level where we are helping more and more Muslims in the UK. So, because of these differences of opinion, so for example, just say HMC started to accept machine slaughter or started to accept stunning, then we would be able to cover the whole market. But we're not there to accept this or that. We have to go according to what our scholars and our board of muftis say.
Yes.
But this is what I want. I want the halal market to be regulated to a level where when somebody writes halal, it's definitely halal. Yeah,
yes.
That's what I want. I don't want Muslims to be cheated. I don't want consumers to be cheated.
We don't want to compromise on issues that could compromise this idea of it being halal. Yeah. So this is whole idea of acting on caution, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, inshallah.
And just to clarify,
I've got a question for you.
Just to clarify that although we as HMC follow a cautious opinion, it doesn't mean that we disagree with the opinion of Mufti Abdullah Nana or others who are using stunning, non-stunning. We don't call anyone haram. Yeah, that's been our clear guidelines right from the beginning. We don't call anyone else doing that. This person's doing haram or whatever.
Abdullah has been quite diplomatic, actually. Anyway, alhamdulillah. Anyway, I've got another question for you. A vision that I have
Yeah.
Okay, regarding organizations like HMC, maybe something we could look towards in the future, is these organizations, especially when they have a real standing in the Muslim community, start engaging with the regulatory bodies of the food authority in that country.
We do.
So they actually
Just to
start
let you know,
linking
yeah,
in with them
I mean, I've been to see them.
and define some of those policies in terms of slaughter generally.
No, we do. I've been to the Minister of Food and Agriculture here a few times. Awal knows, and Awal knows how much engagement we have with the government, and Awal is the one who sometimes makes sure that we are on the table. So that happens. The issue is sometimes is what is the government's agenda in terms of what do they want. And just to let you know, in the UK, there is a push towards trying to constrain non-stunned as much as possible and move them towards stunning. And it won't be done by saying stunning is banned. What they will do is make it difficult for slaughterhouses to do stunning.
Or very expensive process.
To do non-stunning, make it more expensive, make it more difficult, and therefore they will have to go towards stunning.
Okay, so it's just something that those people who have that kind of influence, as Muslims, we should work towards, you know, changing things in that sense. And I know in certain countries, especially in Europe, you know, it's much harder, you know, depending on the sort of Islamic or Islamophobic agenda of the government, because, you know, that can play a role in this idea of stunning and non-stunning as well. So inshallah, we'll leave it at that. Jazakumullah khair for all our panelists. Alhamdulillah, it's been a very fruitful conversation, inshallah, and there's a lot more to come. So I want to thank you all. These are very valuable panelists and they've taken some time out. We've gone well over time. I apologize for that as well, inshallah. But before I go, I'm just going to take just a few minutes of your time, inshallah, and just talk about our Fiqh of Halal food course that is currently running. It's already had its first session, which was just an introductory session. So this is an opportunity for you to consider joining this course, which and where we will discuss a lot of detail around some of those points that have been mentioned today. We have other ulama on board who will be also discussing real important principles like what does it mean by halal and tayyiban, what, you know, discussions about food additives in food processing. So this goes beyond just slaughter. We're talking about food generally. So halal and haram ingredients in the food processing industry. What is halal slaughtering process? So there'll be a lot of discussion about some of the other issues that we talked about that Dr. Awal Fusini put forward to us. That can be discussed in some of these other sessions. Some of the contemporary issues in halal meat that we really need to start thinking about, because it's not just about slaughter, it's about the manufacturing process and how this food is processed and brought to us, you know, on our supermarket shelves. And also extending the discussion to halal and haram medicine, because we have a lot of this in our medicine. So we have gelatin, we have all sorts of other additives and excipients that are in our medication. So how do we approach that and discuss that in terms of halal and haram? Also in cosmetics. So cosmetics is another industry in itself. And also the Sharia issues related to the halal food supply chain. And then finally, there'll be something about halal food certification and all sorts of different technologies that are being used today. And for you as consumers, what guidelines we would give you in terms of making sure that the food that comes on your table is halal, and also guidelines for the food industry, and not just the producers, but also the consumers. So it's a holistic course for everyone, inshallah. So, you know, if you have that interest, then I would highly recommend you consider joining this course on Fiqh of Halal and food. And there is a link there that you can, that should be there on chat, that you can go into. And inshallah, if you are interested, you can register on this course, which is currently just started as we speak. So inshallah, jazakumullah khair. I want to thank our panelists. It's been a very fruitful discussion, and there is more to come on the course as well, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you protected. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to bring halal food onto our tables. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.